Right. Well, welcome to our March edition of the Geomatrix Data-Driven Community. We are grateful that you guys carved out time to spend with us today. Hopefully you've got your lunch and you're comfortable and ready to jump in with us to how to make those the survey data visualizations be more enjoyable and less painful. And I'm pleased to be your host today. We do this monthly, and we have topics that we select around either requests from various customers or fresh pickings from the grapevine of development that's recently been done. And that is how today's topic came about. So got a little bit of announcements and meeting normals. We'll talk about Lauren is our featured speaker today. She is our manager of data analytics at Geomatrix and is absolutely an expert when it comes to UX UI design. And it's my pleasure to get to work alongside of her. And then we'll have her presentation, then we'll have a time for Q&A at the end. Also, very much like for this to be more of a conversation and less of just a one-way delivery. She and I both love that. And so if you have questions that you want to ask during it, we have chat enabled for our webinar. Feel free to put comments, questions, and such in there as we go along. So yeah, chat will be available, Q&A at the end. By Friday, there will be an email in your inbox that will be kind of linking to some of the resources that we referenced today. So, and I'm going to keep an eye on that, the waiting room, Lauren, to help people make their way in. So, and truly, if you have an idea for a topic you'd like to see us cover, we are all ears and we really welcome your feedback and your input, right? So I'm Celia Fryer. I'm the training and enablement lead at Geomatrix, and I am been here for about a year. I've been part of the Tableau and data analytics environment for the last 2 decades. Very much been involved in Tableau the last 15 years and been teaching it for 10. I also am a university professor at University of San Francisco, and enjoy participating in things that happen with the Data Fam. I'll let Lauren introduce herself, and then we'll jump into our presentation for the day.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Lauren Cristaldi, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the manager of our data analytics team. I come from like a state government background, and yeah, I have about 8 years. I think it's 9 years now, but it's always changing. I don't want to do the math anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, this is probably out of date, to be fair.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'll fix it.
I think I did the math recently, and I was like, no, that can't be right. And I was like, oh, I guess that is right.
It is right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to show you guys some different ways to visualize survey data today.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And so with that, this topic was fresh pickings from the grapevine of development done in-house recently. And so as an educator, I was telling our marketing team this morning, as an educator, when it came to survey data that they wanted to use for their capstone, I always tried to steer people away from it because it can be more complex, more frustrating, and it's just difficult to do well with. So I was really delighted when I heard that Lauren was willing to do this today. So hopefully it will be that intersection of where feedback meets foresight, right? So a lot of decisions get made around survey data. So it is actually very important. So, and with that, Lauren, if you're ready, I will stop sharing my screen and hand the baton over to you. And please, folks, just know I am watching Slack, the chat channel, and would really welcome you to jump in, ask questions as we go through.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to turn my video off because I get too close to the camera and I don't want to do that to anyone.
Okay, that sounds good.
So I'll start with how I get all of the data ready. So I use this data mock star by the visionary Adam Miko, which Celia introduced me to. And this thing has been awesome just for wanting to put together like quick demos or anything like that. Or maybe you want to test out like a new viz style, but you don't have the data ready yet. This can be really useful. So if we start from the top, I know it seems like a lot of prompts. It kind of is. So I asked this model to produce this team survey. So we want to like look at sentiment among the team. This is more like, I guess, an HR use case, but it can be adjusted if you had something more specific, like industry specific. Because I know survey data is used a lot in marketing, especially, but it can be good to know just like, your own employees, how they're feeling. I guess now that I'm a manager, I'm thinking about that more. So I produced this, and then it prompts you like any edits you'd want to make, or like here, I just asked to make it more personal. So we get like a better range of answer styles. So now we have more like categorical and scale. But the really fun ones in survey data are like more of the short answer or like a more long form response. And let's see, as we go through, I may have asked that later on. And I'm still growing and learning as a prompt engineer. So
And I just want to
we all
point out
are.
that this is a great example, Lauren, of how it's a iteration, right, of asking questions and refining the prompt, don't you think? And I
Yeah,
love what you said
absolutely.
about, yeah, it's a process to get really good data, that especially when we're asking it to be generated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's better also if you are super clear, like as clear as possible. And we don't need to add like the niceties. Well, I say that, but maybe AI is going to come after me one day because I never say please and thank you. But
I heard a debate recently about the extra tokens that get spent on please and thank you. So I don't know. Just asking.
yeah, I read something about that too. Yeah, like the power that it takes for it to process
Uh,
a please and thank
uh-huh.
you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
But yeah, to that point with kind of opening that conversation and having these iterations to make it like exactly what you want. Here you can see it's expanded. We have these two more like long form responses. And I use the exact verbiage that it gave me, more like the sentiment friendly. And it's nice because it explains the work. So you're not just getting sentiment is positive. You understand like response, this response falls into positive. And that's always nice, like if you need to add a guide to your dashboard and say positive it equates to this response.
Yeah, those definitions are essential, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, and it's especially nice if ChatGPT can write it for you and you don't have to like write out for
Mm-hmm.
every single one.
Right.
And then here I'm asking it to calculate the overall sentiment based on everything above across all of the questions. So that's also nice because then you don't have to do that work yourself. And of course, always, go back and check through because not, this isn't perfect, but it definitely alleviates a lot of that burden and workload. And then it suggested a couple of other columns that might be useful. So I just copy and pasted and it added those in. So now this is really growing from the top when we only had like 10 columns. So we're getting a lot more out of this. And then I asked it to produce those survey responses in Excel and then supporting tabs for the question and answer guides and the logic. So where it was listing above, its logic for each like scoring category and all of that. And the pivot summary wasn't actually that useful, but it was just something to try out. Then it's also able to give us so the survey responses in a normal form and a long form, which is better for Tableau in certain cases, which is also nice because then you don't have to like pivot everything. I usually use Prep to do that, but this was even faster than Prep. And I love Tableau Prep, so any excuse to use it usually. Then with those guides, I asked it to provide this model so that when we're building out that data source in Tableau, we'll have those like foreign keys and other objects mapped to one another across the tabs. And it added a little summary. So let's look at that data.
And Lauren, you might want to restate what you were just doing because a bunch of people have joined us after we started the conversation. I'm not sure it's clear that you were creating if you want to just kind of summarize what you were doing there, because I think that was incredibly important, by the way.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I was using ChatGPT, this data mock star, like mock data generator. And basically it's just going through the iterations of responses to customize your like data set that you're using. If you already have survey questions and answers in really any form, you could put that in here as well. And then it could do the same thing like in the later steps when I'm asking it to kind of expand or change some columns or categorize for different things like sentiment overall. Then adding in those tabs for support so that you have more descriptions for the questions and answers. This logical model so that you can bring all of those support tabs together in Tableau with the actual responses.
Yeah, this is great. This is really good. And if you're trying to illustrate something, also if you're trying to communicate a problem you're having with your own internal proprietary or data that's protected by PII or PHII, this is an engine you can use to approximate it, so then you can get support or help. But for today's session, we clearly needed to do something that was a little bit more abstracted from actual direct responses. So Lauren, having had to work with this both recently and over time, this was a good way for us to get good survey data for us to demonstrate today. So thank you for that re-roll there, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and thank you for that note too. That was a good thing to note. Yeah, let's look at our output. So here are different tabs. And this would be like the most, I say like normal view of it, where we have it more of like in a wider format. But we're getting a response, so it's like one survey per line. So we have that employee and then those different questions and the answers per row. Then the next two tabs, so we had released a tips and tricks video recently about using image URL field types. So I just built these out because I had this saved in Cloudinary. I'll go through that in another step though. So yeah, those are those two keys for the images. Here's that pivot summary. This was an example of where I was just ChatGPT suggested it and I was like, oh, why not? So I just wanted to see what that would look like. But I don't think it's too useful, but it's always good to have options. Then here's one of our sample guides or like lookup tables where we have, the different questions, the description of the question. And this column name is the foreign key where we're going to be connecting. And you'll see that pop up again on the answers. Then the sentiment logic is just for, it doesn't really connect cleanly to the other ones. So that's a case where I would go back normally and ask ChatGPT to make it so that we could connect to these more easily. But this is also just good to have, if you wanted to have another data source where you just bring in this table just for a description.
Lauren, a
Then,
couple of questions about how much interaction with the LLMs as a general class that we would have when we were working with client data. I
so
answered it with we don't use ChatGPT in particular with client data at all. But I want you to have a shot at that question as well.
yeah, no, we don't use the LLMs for client data. Um, Not that it's not safe, but I just don't think that's part of one of our policies is that we don't do that just because we're worried about, if anything were to happen. This is mostly I'd say I mostly use ChatGPT to like model things first, and then it kind of helps me go through some questions. So like with this mock data, if I told it, oh, make some marketing data for me based on certain questions, then that would help me and I wouldn't actually be using any, proprietary information or data. So I'd say that's
Yeah,
mostly what we use it for.
really good. And recently, Lauren and I working on an account together. Somebody had asked for a certain type of visualization, but the data very much would have been the data hadn't even been shared with us yet because they weren't sure that it was possible what they were asking for. So Lauren created some data using the same engine along the lines of what we've been told that the topics and categories would be. And she referenced it to, didn't you use the CDC site? You referenced real data out of it, but it wasn't the client data, right?
Oh yeah, it did pull like the publicly
Mm-hmm.
available the
Yeah,
CDC.
publicly available. Right, exactly. So we were able to inform it with things that would be domain specific and relevant, but not have anybody's privacy or purpose. Someone's mentioned here. All of those rules apply to all that we do. So you have to like navigate carefully so that you are modeling and helping to increase the speed of delivery for your own work, but also keeping it really buttoned up on anybody's actual data. So anyway, thank you for that, Lauren. I just wanted to make sure we circle through that in case anybody's thinking about that because we've got 3 or 4 comments in chat about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to call out. It's a good like public service announcement. We're not using your data in ChatGPT.
Correct.
So, oh, here's our survey model. So this is how, and I wish that this just existed everywhere because this would be so useful in like real databases where you don't always have the right documentation. I'd say more often than not, you don't have the right documentation, so you don't know what that foreign key is.
Right.
So this is really nice. So we won't actually bring this into Tableau, but it's great for a reference as you're building your data source in Tableau. Then this is that long form. So this would be like our taller version because back here in the wide version, while it's great that it's, that we have all that information per row per employee, when we go to bring in these other keys like the question guide, well, we can't tell Tableau to create a relationship on, column H based on row 2 or something like that. So that's where this long form comes in handy. And really you do need both, and I'll show you how I put them together because I've done a few survey dashboards now for clients, and that was a big part of it was where we had to make sure that we had a long format and a wide format. just for like ease of filtering or, swapping views out for other views, or you want to look at, you know, one employee in particular across, or like all the employees across the different questions and question types. That's the long format comes in handy. So now that we've looked at the data, so before we start getting like building out, and I'll show you the data source. This is something I made for our team Secret Santa. So I just kind of reused that and generated some dummy names based on our own team's responses, and then adjusted things accordingly. And honestly, I really just wanted to show this off because I was super proud of it. I had a lot of fun building this, maybe too much fun.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, here I have, these profile pictures. And this is one sheet, which is, I don't even know how I figured this out, but I did. I'm using index and then a set, so you can actually create these different rows for the profiles or team members, and then have them all in one sheet. And then I'm using this sheet as a filter for the rest of the view. So if I select Alex, now it brings up her profile and just like a random address. And this is laid out similar to the one I had walked through with the mock data. We just have like more fun categories to go through. I'm using dynamic shapes, so I'm assigning actual like shape files or images to the different subcategories. Then each person or team member, they have their own little like profile, like user icon that I just got from Figma. But it's kind of a fun way to show like who has similar fandom. And then you can see these icons for different people instead of, sometimes I feel like, especially with survey data, where people go wrong is they try to put too many words. And then, but it's also really hard to visualize like outside of having a lot of words. So I thought this was a creative way to kind of show, oh, look at all the people up here versus, gaming versus sports or music. So you're seeing the number of team members that answered within those categories. And also actually seeing, so you're seeing the forest and the trees at the same time. And then we have this overall down here with the top response called out, which this is my favorite use case for a donut. That way we're calling attention to the
Great
part.
idea. The top response being the center as the like into the KPI replacement. That's actually a great idea, especially for this sort of use case, right? Love
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Yeah, super nice.
Yeah, and then having the like a better version of a legend over here. Because a lot of times with pies or donuts, we start getting kind of, especially if this was, an even smaller percentage, then that label would get cut off or it would overlap another label, or as we're adjusting size, not all the labels would fit. So this way you get a legend telling you what each color is and also that percentage. Yeah, and then most of the questions are just kind of in the same format. But since I'm using, in this case, I'm using that long form version, just with a different set of mock data, I'm able to have this drop down where we have the different categories of questions and answers. And then it's really easy just to switch. And it's fast because we're not using as many sheets.
Can you describe but those performance issues a little bit more? There's a couple of notes about that, and I have observed that you have some really nice efficiencies you've got in play here.
Yeah, in terms of performance, I'd say what I try to focus on the most is the number of views or worksheets in a dashboard. So if you're applying a filter and you have, let's say, a sheet for each of these, instead of just one sheet where you're applying this and then it changes the categories, it's going to be a lot more performant if it only has to load one sheet and then filter, as opposed to load 10 different sheets. Because even if you're using Dynamic Zone, it's still in the background and it's still trying to load in the background. So this is just taking a lot of that, like load time off of Tableau. I guess does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And aren't you using map layers for some of your layout selections as well?
Yes. Oh, actually, I don't know if I am in this one. So I figured out that index. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm using it here.
Mm-hmm.
So for those custom legends, yeah, the map layers can be really handy. So here I'm just making, yeah, recently I'm all about, well, I've always been all about donuts and pie charts. Kind of a hot take, I guess, but map layers are like my new favorite feature in Tableau. And they've been around for a little while, but I've been trying to use them just everywhere I can because they're a lot more performant. Because it goes back to now you only have to have one sheet instead of having 10 sheets. Like, especially when you're building out KPIs. Like, let's say you want to show the time series as well as the total. Maybe you want to call out some like growth metrics at the same time. You can do that all in one sheet with map layers instead of having that be, 3 or 4 sheets. And the map layers are pretty easy. I do make point, and then these numbers don't matter. It just depends on what you're building out. So we have the columns and the rows. Oh, wait, I always get those mixed up. Okay, longitude and latitude it's kind of backwards from what you'd think X and Y and how this usually would be, just because it's a map. If we go to make point. Also, I feel like I don't call this out enough, but the fact that Tableau has this guide over here where you can look up what the different functions are is so nice. Because even in all my years I've been using Tableau, I still forget like exactly especially for things that I don't use all the time.
It's great for confirmation, to be sure. Yeah, because there's so many choices, and then there's undocumented ones beyond that. So there's a lot of options here, especially since it's borrowing a lot from the SQL engine underneath it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other tools. I don't think, yeah, I don't know, I'm still traumatized from using Power BI and DAX, but so with the make point, yeah, it's the latitude and longitude. So how we have it here. And that's where it's going to fall either horizontally or vertically. So this one, for example, I'm just using that 0.11. It's the same because I don't really, if I had multiple columns, that's when I would care, or like sub rows within one dimension row, because all it's doing is recalculating that, not recalculating, but it's laying it out per row. So where we have this subcategory, yes or no, it's laying it out again, depending on the row value of that dimension. And then you can also show the header, which isn't that wild that you can show the header. It still gets me sometimes because I'm like, this is a map. That's weird to have longitude and latitude like this. But yeah, in this case, I just adjusted it really just for looks. You don't necessarily have to adjust it. But I adjusted it here for the 0.5 and then the end is just 4. And I think it's because I wanted to, and here, let me hide these again. If we go back to our dashboard, yeah, I wanted it to be closer to the donut. Otherwise, it would just default to kind of be in the middle because we only have one, technically 1 point map layer that's being used. But yeah, if I could just like talk all day about map layers, I would. So from this example, I know we're about halfway, so I'll get into what we started with, where we're generating new mock data. And I'll show you how I set up that data model based on the Excel sheet. So we have our wide format survey responses from the start. I'm bringing in that department and overall sentiment key for those image URLs. So we're just using that relationship to connect on department. And then the same for the sentiment. Then here, we're going to connect the wide format to the long format. And we're just going to use employee name. Because there really isn't any other rows that we could connect here since the wide format has all of those questions and answers like pivoted differently. Then here's our long format, and we'll attach that answer guide where we have the question column and the column name and those response values to the answer value so that we can pick up those descriptions of the different answers, and same for question. We'll have descriptions of the different questions and also the type, which is nice if you want to swap between looking at more categorical responses or the scaled responses. One thing to note is in this long format, we don't have that overall score. Again, that's something I could go back to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you add in the overall in the long format? But we can pick that up from the wider view and everything will still flow.
And do you want to check this question is in chat? Do you use the wide format data in Tableau, given that you already have the long format? I'm not sure that I understand. Okay, so are you connecting on what that question is asking? Or Helen, do you want to elaborate? Okay, so the question is, why do you need both the wide and the long?
Yeah, so no, that's a good question. With the wide, sometimes it's just easier when you are just looking at like an employee view and you want to show like a scorecard almost, or assessment for one employee, whereas the long format gives you more flexibility to look across employees. So it's just giving you options for those views. And also like the department, like these dimensions that we have that aren't a part of the long format, they need to connect to the rows in the wide format. So when we're adding extra like detail, so like adding in these image URLs to have dynamic images attached to these different departments or that sentiment, that's where we'd bring those in to that wide format, because in the long format, it would be a lot more complicated to bring those in, even if it did exist, since all of the rows are repeating in the longer format. I think it'll make more sense once I'll show you a couple of the tabs as we're
And
building out.
I think that something that Bill is asking now is probably congruent with something you said earlier about how that you would bring this data together often inside of prep into a long format. Is that, don't you commonly use prep for?
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually did that with the team one. So that first example I was showing in the original version, like with our actual like the ZO team responses,
Yeah,
I
right,
used
right.
prep to like it created an answer key and then it pivoted all the questions and answers for the team so that we'd have that longer view versus the wider view.
Okay. And Helen, thank you for your follow-up there. She said thanks you for answering the question. She understands what you meant by that. No.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's an even more like succinct way to put it. I think this is more, the wider version matters more for your dimensions, not necessarily the question and answer. So it's like the plate for, the sandwich that you're making from the actual like the meat of it, of the survey. I don't know if that made sense, but I'm gonna go with it.
Well, it is lunchtime, so there you go.
Yeah, exactly. I might be hungry. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
So as I start building out really anything, I like to bring everything into more of like a tabular view so that I can get a sense of where everything falls, kind of brainstorm different visuals that would make sense, especially as we're going from the categorical to the scale. Because with the scale, we have the number values available, but with categorical, it's all string values. So my first stab at it, I was thinking it would be interesting to see like a dynamically sized bubble and then have it colored based on the answer description. So that way when you hover over, it's saying the question is, I have the autonomy I need to do my best work. This is on the scale, it's 3, which is neutral. And there were 3 employees that had responded with 3 in that response value. Whereas we had 11 employees agree to the autonomy and 6 that strongly agreed. So now this way you're getting all of that, like that's a lot of information all at once. And then it's good to have the tooltips because it adds all of that detail and context for you without taking up too much space. And if we go to all, we can see how all of the questions and answers kind of scale beside each other. Another thing you could do which I feel like doesn't get used enough. Let me look for my question column. If we throw question column onto the pages and press play, yeah, now it'll show you kind of like a visual of how those are changing. That animation doesn't get used a lot, but I think especially for like high level presentations, it can be nice to have that visual like animation style where you can see trends and you can adjust how fast it is as well.
And I looked away for just a second. Did you show how that was back over in your dashboard? I love pages, shelves, things in motion. I feel like that's certainly underused. It's a great way to draw attention.
Yeah. So sorry, how I added it to the dashboard?
Yes,
Yeah, let me remove that. So if we go over here to that question column, I just had it. Oh, there it is. And you just drop it on pages.
Mhm.
Then if you have it in the filters, just set it to all.
Cool.
And you can press play, and then you're good to go. Because I think when you do it this way, yeah, if you have that, if you're just selecting one, you're filtering it, and the pages happen after all your filters. So just make sure that it's cleared or set to all. And if we remove the question column, now we can watch it change, and it'll show you what that question is at the top. Any other questions around that? Or maybe ideas for a different way to visualize? Awesome. So our next one be these categorical type views. So here is where we would have basically the same thing as the scale type. But since it's, and I should change it to categorical. But since these are strings, it's better to use so we'd use the total employees and we would show kind of like back here with the survey, the other survey. And we could build where we have the different team members associated with that, or an overall total of the team members. Oh, I think someone put an annotation. Was there a question?
I think so.
Oh, it might have been by accident. That's okay. For the sake of time, since we more or less have this already built out in the first example, I really want to show you guys how we're using the image URLs. So a few notes about image URLs. They support JPEG, GIF, and PNG. Then the only criteria really is for it to be under 200 KB, and it needs to exist or be referencing a cloud-based repository so that's publicly accessible. So I use Cloudinary. It's a free tool. Let's see. So here I just have a folder. Here are my different assets. You can just search for images that get uploaded. You can upload images that you have locally, or you can put in like certain web addresses for those images. So here are my different images, and then I just copied the URL and created those supporting tabs to map the URL to that certain dimension. So we go back here. So these are technically GIFs. I will say in Tableau Desktop, they don't always load, but once you publish them, they do load. So here I'm showing the overall sentiment. I'll just go back one step. In order to establish that a certain field is that image URL type field, if you see this little picture icon from the data pane or the fields list, you go down, it should be a string, and then image role and URL. So to see this in action, go over to our cloud site. And of course, you don't have to use these. I just, I pulled some sample ones. But this is another good way to add like more animation and make it like more visually, I don't know, creative and interesting. Because now I'm associating the neutral, and that's 45% of the total respondents had a neutral, like overall sentiment. And then 55 had a positive overall sentiment. And I just think it's fun that we can use GIFs. Any questions on that?
See any questions in chat? Anybody? Has anyone used the image URLs before? I'm just curious if you have, if you want to add a reaction to your screen, that'd be awesome. It's not brand new, but it is relatively new. And I feel like that's a low-hanging fruit for really bringing in some additional interest and creativity into our what we do. And Lauren recorded a little short tips and tricks video on how to get that done. And I've just put the link to it into chat. So if you want to grab that link and look it up afterwards, she'll step you through how to get that done.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you.
So I guess with all those options, I'd be interested to know if anyone is using survey data currently or planning to. I guess what struggles are common that you found.
Amy Moss says she's planning to. Amy, do you want to come off mute and describe a little bit about what you're doing?
I have a survey for like 20 about 25 agency, and for each agency I pull sample, but the sample size is different for each agency. So totally of all the agency I have like 300 people. So, and then do survey to those 300 people, and each people may answer about like 150 questions. So I'm kind of working on how to present the huge amount of um like contents.
Yeah, and that can always be the hardest hurdle, I feel like, when you have that much
Yeah.
data and you want it to be useful and have
Hmm.
nothing gets left out, but you don't want to overwhelm.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think in that case, like using a visual similar to this one, maybe not necessarily like using the pages, but like counting the number of employees and how kind of like putting things in bins almost, where you're saying this is how that was distributed across the number of employees, especially if you have, I mean, that's a lot of responses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like the number one biggest like hurdle. And then second would be like if you have any like the long form answers and trying to put those into categories, which is where like ChatGPT was useful because it was able to evaluate different like long form answers and then say, this is how we categorize these, or using natural language to assess like overall sentiment based on keywords. So yeah, I'd say like as much as you can categorize things and kind of group them together.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
all about the story that you're
Yeah,
telling.
yeah, we yeah, I want to show like a bigger scale, a big like a category or group question, but also want to show, for example, if one agent fail on something, I wanted to show what kind of question the the agent failed. So those are just detailed question.
Oh yeah, kind of like yeah, showing
Yeah, I
research.
like I see first thing I see the high level category, whether how many fail, how many not fail, and then if fail, I want to show what kind of question fail. So that's the detailed information. And I don't I'm working on that, like how to show all the question because that would be lots of them.
Yeah, no, and that's a good like that's a good flow to establish where you're showing like the highest level to like more of a medium detail view with the different categories, and then the lowest or like the greatest level of detail
Hmm.
at the end. Yeah, that's a really good plan of attack for surveys.
I don't want to take more time, but I can always find you if I need your help.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Anybody else have any questions or comments working on survey data, considering survey data? Well, if not, I just want to tell Lauren, thank you so much for sharing with us today, um and all the fact that you use this, we're able to use what we use for the what was it, Secret Santa?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is impressive. So um and if you guys would just kindly, there are several links in the chat that are, you know, feel free to grab the link to the YouTube. And then if you need to generate sample data to do a proof of concept or to share and show something that is not going to where the real data needs to be more held by privacy for sure, like most every data set we work with. But anyway, Adam Miko has his the tools that I linked earlier about 8 minutes after the hour. Feel free to grab those as well. So very good. All right. Well, we'll give you guys a couple minutes back. Lauren, thank you so much. And I appreciate you guys joining in today. And we'll be sending the recording out on in a day or so. And am I missing anything, Lauren, do you think? Or
No, I think that's good. Yeah, thank you.
All right. You guys have a good rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you in a month. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.